ahead of the Institute as they've gotten ahead of a lot of folks who are working to make kind of concrete policy change in these years. But I think the reason I said yes is I think it's important for folks to understand that this is immediately on the mind of the Federal Reserve, and we are taking real actions to pull in the information that we need to understand what folks are really experiencing on the ground. It's incredibly important when it's timely for the Federal Reserve to be very clear that we are working hard to absorb what is happening in the full sense of that word throughout the U.S. economy right now. And the Institute is a really important instrument for that. And I think other parts of the Federal Reserve are working hard at that as well. So that's why I said yes.
Abigail Wozniak, she is the director, the inaugural director, actually, of the Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. Dr. Wozniak, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Kai.
It's going to be a quick one because we're a little bit tight on time. We know there is a public health crisis right now, and there is an economic crisis as well. But the Congressional Budget Office said today that that economic squeeze is going to last long after this lockdown is done. The CBO says the American economy is going to be almost $8 trillion smaller by the year 2030 than it would have been had nobody ever heard the word COVID-19. That's about a 3% hit from where we were supposed to be at the end of the decade.
Marketplace is supported by the Financial Times, exploring how crises make reputations and helping to navigate the new agenda. Learn more at ft.com. And by Fidelity Wealth Management, where advisors work with their clients to develop flexible investment strategies that evolve as their needs change. Fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
All right, we got to go. Here's your moment of economic context on the way out. Planning calendar edition. This Friday is the first Friday of the month, which means we are going to get the May unemployment report. Spoiler alert, it is not gonna be great. Our daily production team includes Bridget Bodner, Andy Coleman, Ali Pham, Maria Hollenhorst, Sean McHenry, Daisy Palacios, and Bennett Purser. I'm Kai Resdahl. We will see you tomorrow, everybody.
Pledges by June 30th, supporter Carol Haas-Gravano will donate $75,000. Donate now at whyy.org to have your gift counted and support our award-winning program.
WHYY monitors traffic and transit for major delays, supported by the T.J. Martell Foundation.
WHYY is grateful to our sponsors for their support during this crisis. Crucial backing from businesses allows us to bring our community objective information in uncertain times. To learn about business support, call Nancy at 215-351-1223.
Supporting WHYY, the Doctor of Business Administration program at Goldie Beacon College. Their DBA students consult for local and national businesses and help solve challenges using technology. Learn more at go.edu/DBA. This is WHYY-FM Philadelphia, WNJN-FM Atlantic City, WNJZ-FM Cape May Courthouse, WNJM-FM Manhattan, WNJB-FM Richton, and WNJS-FM Berlin. From WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Terry Gross with Fresh Air. Today, we talk about the death of George Floyd in police hands, the protests against his death and other acts of police brutality against black men and women, and the impact of the protests that became violent. Our guest, Eric Adams, will talk with us from his perspective of having been beaten by police when he was 15, becoming a police officer with the intention of helping to reform the police from within, and his position now as Brooklyn Borough President, the CEO of Brooklyn. There have been large protests in Brooklyn. Some of them became violent. Brooklyn is also a pandemic hotspot. Later, Maureen Corrigan will review a new novel by Britt Bennett, whose first novel was the bestseller The Mothers, and David Bianculli will review 3 TV shows. First news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Jack Spear. As a curfew goes into effect at this hour in Washington, D.C., police and demonstrators are already clashing in front of the White House. Tear gas has been flying and flashbang grenades have been going off there. Police began moving in on protesters about a half an hour ago, even before the curfew began, seeking to push demonstrators out of the area. Some police officers on horseback. President Trump, meanwhile, spoke a short time ago in the White House Rose Garden, saying he will mobilize resources, federal and civilian, in what he calls riots and lawlessness.
We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Trump also said he's prepared to deploy the military in areas where he said governors and others are failing to quell violent protests. The White House is blasting the U.S. governors following the 6th night of nationwide protests. Earlier today, NPR's Tamara Keith reports President Trump berated governors during a phone call.
President Trump hasn't made public remarks about the ongoing unrest in the streets since Saturday afternoon, unless you count tweets. But in a call with the nation's governors described by multiple people with knowledge of what was discussed, Trump expressed frustration with the failure to contain protests, which in many cities turned from peaceful to violent and destructive. He urged the governors to call in the National Guard and said, if we don't have law and order, we don't have a country. In a particularly testy exchange, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker told